What's going on, guys? Zedd here, bringing you another Marvel Midnight Suns video. And this one is, as you can see, going to be just my quick sort of Venom deck breakdown, decisions I make, why I take this build, and kind of give you some suggestions as to why I do what I do, talk about why I don't like assimilation and why you don't see it on the screen. Yeah, that's really not much to it. I want to say, though, that I'll always do a DLC deck video for the way they're released, but pretty much going forward, any video that's not explicitly me stating this is vanilla, it will always imply that it's on my balance patch mod. So keep that in mind going forward. I'll also make that explicitly clear. Eventually, I'm going to build deck lists for my patched version of the game, and so that'll be completely different than my vanilla. Well, maybe not completely, but it'll be somewhat different than my vanilla lists. And so look for that content in the coming future. But for now, I just sort of started my first full streamed playthrough on the mod. I will be uploading that to YouTube anyway, so on and so forth. That's not why you're here. Let's talk about Venom. So you'll have to forgive me. I don't know all of Venom's name, like the card names yet, so I do have the wiki open beside me. So I may be referencing some things. I want to talk about some cards I don't use and why that is. But first, let's talk about the deck that I do use and why I prefer this one. Now, there is another way to build him, but I found that this one is just better. So overall, what are my views on Venom? Well, in general, I would say he's okay. He's decent. He's not bad. He does okay damage. He can support decently. He has no tanking ability, which is unfortunate, but whatever. His passive is super uninspired. Most of his cards are super uninspired, but that doesn't mean he's bad. He's just a little dry. He's a little lacking in the design department. Now, there's two ways to play Venom, in my opinion. First of which is more of a supporting in the form of CC and debuffs. The CC being the knockback from, again, this is a card I don't know quite yet. I always mix it up. A Web Toss. You could use Web Toss if you want to knockback, and then you can spread out debuffs with things like Tendril Strike or the other chain that he has, Devouring Strike. You could do that, and then you of course have Symbiote Bind. That's a bind, and then you have Tasty Brains as sort of your damaging option there, and then. So yeah, CC being in the form of bind. And then if you do play him as DPS, you may elect to run assimilation, but I'm going to talk about assimilation in this video at the end. And I want to discuss like why I actually think it's a bait, why I don't think it's a very good card based on his current design. But anyhow. So we have 2 copies of Tendril Strike, 2 copies of Insatiable Hunger, 2 copies of Symbiote Bind, and then the Symbiotic Senses and Tasty Brains, those are what I'm going to call flex positions, but these are the 2 that I default to. I really don't like using Symbiotic Senses. I would put a Web Toss in there. Sometimes you could put a, what is it called? Spike Burst. You could put a Spike Burst in there, but I don't like the 10% chance. And then you could, if you really were dead set on assimilation, you could put assimilation in that spot, though it would be quite wasteful, and it would only be benefiting Tasty Brains. So yeah, that's that. Tendril Strike is a great quick card. It is responsible for spreading your debuffs because as long as you debuff one target, and then you can target a minion with the second hit, and boom, quick refund, right? Insatiable Hunger, it's not that the card is necessarily good, so much as it's just free, and it's a hand/deck thinner. That's why I like it. I don't really care about the extra Ravenous. I don't care about the extra at the start of next turn. That doesn't matter to me because we're not running Assimilation here, so it doesn't really matter. But what is quite interesting is when you get Draw Last Attack on it as a mod, or you get like some other just buff mod that's helpful. When I was playing through the Venom DLC on like a finished run, I built 2 Insatiable Hungers, and the first mod I rolled for both was Draw Last Attack. So that does lead me to wonder if the mod pool is quite low. I don't know. But if you get Draw Last Attack on Insatiable Hunger, it's great because in this deck it means you're drawing, if it's Venom, you're only drawing Tendril Strike. But either way, that mod is very good. And then Symbiotic Senses, like I said, I actually don't like this. So if you get like, say, on redraw gain conceal, on redraw gain heroism, or if it's use it and gain block, or use it and gain resist, any sort of mod like that is quite good. I don't really think you need or want free on it, or you can't get free on it, sorry. So you wouldn't need it, excuse me. And so that's fine. I don't love it, but it is helpful, I guess, if you're searching for a symbiote bind. But I will say this. The nice thing about symbiotic senses is if you play it once, your 2 tendril strikes will both not consume Ravenous, which is pretty awesome, given that you only have 2 attack cards in the deck and you would play it and only, they would consume a Ravenous. So that interaction is nice, but as a base card, drawing 1, it's not really that great. So you are looking for some sort of mod that makes it better. The card baseline though, not great. Entirely depends what you pull. I think that's the flex spot if nothing else. You could, like I said, web toss would be great if you want a knockback. I flex it into web toss. Or if you wanted a 4th heroism card, you're welcome to do that as well. And then 2 binds. I actually don't really care for Symbiote Bind as a card. Draw a Venom card for each attack against the target this turn. I don't like that effect because if you bind the target, why would you waste the bind on the target and then proceed to attack that target? Right? Like it doesn't make sense because when you bind a target, usually it's to either break through block, so I guess in that sense you would, or to have them not take their turn until next turn. So I just find the effect of upgraded symbiote bind to be a bit awkward and a bit counterintuitive as to, or with the intent of binding somebody. But it does have its niche application. I just don't love it. And then Tasty Brains, super straightforward. It is what it is. On KO, the next Venom attack card played does not consume Ravenous. So that in conjunction with Symbiotic Senses means, and Insatiable Hunger, you're never going to drop below 3 Ravenous. So in that sense, the deck is very, very, very consistent. Now, there's a kicker. You'll notice that the deck only has 3 cards that do damage. Well, I think like the reality of the situation is if you look at the stats of Venom and you look at Tendril Strike, you look at Tasty Brains, you look at all those things, and you factor in his passive, Ravenous, right? It tops out at 51%. He doesn't really smack all that hard compared to some of the other damaging characters baseline. For example, Ghost Rider outdamages him. Iron Man just has more AoE options, but not necessarily per coefficient, but he can outdamage him. And then you have, of course, Blade with Reaper, you have Hulk with his Rage, you have Captain Marvel with her Binary. All these things, they all do more damage than Venom. So the Ravenous upkeep is more like to make Tendril Strike quite a powerful quick attack, because it ends up becoming one of the strongest quicks in the game, if not arguably the. I say arguably. Now, if you roll Web Toss with quick, definitely run that. Definitely run that. But Web Toss with any other mod, yeah, it's not really my cup of tea. And the reason why I don't, so now I'm going to talk about the cards I don't run and why. Lethal Embrace as a first one is just not a great card in general. That's one of his other attack cards. And then Web Toss I don't like because it doesn't have a damage coefficient. So yes, it's a forceful knockback in any direction, which is very good. However, because it doesn't have a damage coefficient and it's not quick by default, it's a very very low reward card. And then for his heroics, Spike Burst is pretty mediocre damage for 3 heroism on top of a negligible chance to bind. AoEs always have the problem where if units, you have to assume that units will be together, and if they're not, it's wasteful. And then the 10% chance to apply bind, well, it's never going to happen when you want it to, and it's only going to happen when you don't need it to. So Spike Burst is a very it's a very expensive card for what it does, and probably something I'll address in my mod. And then that brings us to Assimilation. So Assimilation, if you look at the deck, it specifically only has 3 attack cards, 2 of which already have quick. And Assimilation only affects attacks and heroics. And really, if you are running Assimilation, in my opinion, you should be running, no matter what Venom deck you're playing, 2 Insatiable Hungers, and then if you're running Assimilation. So that's already 3 skill cards, meaning at best, you have 5 attack and 5 heroics, which is fine. Tendril Strike is an amazing card, so you probably want to run at least one, probably two, that's five. So already we have five cards in the deck that don't even benefit from assimilation. So the best way I see assimilation being used, honestly, is like, or not the best, but the most efficient way. It would be if you got just the absolute perfect loadout, like everything got increased damage, you ran like gain strengthened and overpowered items, like or gain overpowered or whatever it's called, and you sort of built him that way, and assimilation was your only skill card. I could see that maybe being fun, but it wouldn't be reliable at all. It wouldn't be very good. I have already one-turned missions with Venom, but it was because it was a vampire mission, which is not very impressive. So that was kind of cool. But in terms of other mission varieties or other mission categories, excuse me, and other situations and enemy variety, I think this version of Venom is better. I don't think his damage is good enough to justify. I think that his supportive capabilities are very reminiscent of Spider-Man's. So in that sense, you could argue that Spider-Man could do Venom's job equally as well. And I think there's maybe an argument there. Difference being that Tendril Strike is way, way, way better than Chain Strike. Way better than Chain Strike. Symbiote Bind is equivalent of Thwip, essentially. And then Tasty Brains, in function, kind of works like an up here. And so, yeah, they're very comparable characters. I don't think either of them are particularly powerful. I think they're both okay. I think that Venom maybe is a bit more consistent, whereas Spidey, when the cards align, right, you have your opportunist plays that sort of line up, you have your Infernal Spider plays which line up. When the cards align for Spider-Man, I think he pops off. But for Venom, he's a very average, solid, consistent character who's not hard to play in my opinion, but he doesn't really bring a whole lot to the table either. This is just the deck that I found works really well. The cool thing about Venom, I will say, is he works well with basically any mod that's good. So for example, on redraw game block is just a shit mod. On redraw recover health is just a shit mod. So like excluding those mods because they're bad, he's great with anything, truthfully. So you can kind of run him any way you want. You can build him any way you want, but this is just what I consider to be very efficient. I think assimilation is a bait, like I said. I really don't like that card. I like what they did conceptually, but it just doesn't pan out. Now, admittedly, if Tendril Strike did not upgrade to Quick, yes, you would almost have to run assimilation to make this character even playable. But the fact that Tendril Strike exists and the fact that Tendril Strike has Quick pretty much negates the need for assimilation, especially given that insatiable hunger, symbiotic senses, and tasty brains all work in some way to maintain Ravenous. So that's my thoughts on Venom. This is what I use on Venom. I'm sure other people have found this build by now. This is what I found just on day one. So there might be something better, but I don't think so. I really don't. I think the fact the cards that you want to play come with Quick or just don't benefit from assimilation, there's no point in running it. It just, yeah. So play with it if you want. This is what I like. This is how I build Venom, and hope you enjoy. Let me know in the comments if you have any arguments or why I'm wrong about assimilation. I'd be curious to have that discussion, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace for now.